All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience and welcome to the webinar titled Strategies for Continuous CTMS Improvement, presented by Biofarm Systems Param Singh, Vice President of Clinical Trial Management Solutions. I'm Eugene Stefanov, the Marketing Manager at Biofarm, and I will be going over some housekeeping items before I turn it over to Param. During the presentation, all participants will be in listen-only mode. However, you may submit questions to the speaker at any time today by typing them in the chat feature located on the left side of your screen. Please state your questions clearly. Note, other webinar participants will not see your questions or comments. Nonetheless, your questions to the speaker will be addressed as time allows towards the end of the presentation. If you still have unanswered questions after the webinar, or would like to request information from Biofarm, feel free to visit the company's website for contact information. As a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted on Biofarm's website within 24 hours. We will also be emailing you a link to the recording. This concludes our housekeeping items. I would now like to turn the call over to Param Singh.
Thank you, Eugene. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar for strategies for continuous improvement with your CTMS. So let me start out by introducing myself. My name is Param Singh. I am the Vice President of the Clinical Trial Management Solution Practice at Biofarm Systems. I've been working in the industry since 1999 and have almost exclusively been working with Siebel Clinical during that time. Before joining Biofarm, a little over now close to 5 years ago, I was part of Accenture's R&D practice and leading CTMS implementations there as well. And now I've had, now it's close to, I think, 17 or 18 implementations of Siebel Clinical under my belt. And also, with all those implementations of Siebel Clinical, we also have created at Biofarm a Siebel Clinical Accelerator Ascend, which we have some previous webinars related to that as well, if you're interested. So now that I've introduced myself, I'd like to take a minute just to talk about my team here at Biofarm and to explain a little bit more about what we do. We provide a variety of services and products related to clinical trial management. We manage implementations of Siebel Clinical, whether those are custom implementations or implementations of our Siebel Clinical Accelerator Ascend. We also implement Oracle Health Sciences LabPass application, which is Oracle's Phase 1 automation solution. And incidentally, our next webinar that we have scheduled in October, the one I'll be delivering, co-delivering with Oracle, is around the LabPass application on October 18th. So if you're interested in that, please register. Also, if you've seen some of our previous webinars, you know that we do some extensive work with integrations in Siebel Clinical as well, and the related systems. Our approach to system implementation itself is very process-focused. So we also provide our process consulting services to help organizations define and harmonize their SOPs and business processes around the organization with respect to clinical trial management, and also, the processes related to supporting and maintaining the application and solution, in which today's topic is one of those areas. And we offer comprehensive training services and products related to Siebel Clinical and our Ascend solution as well. So this is just a glimpse of some of the services and products that we offer in the space. And for more detailed information about any of this, about Ascend, about LabPass, and any of our offerings, please feel free to contact me directly. So let's look at today's agenda. So we're gonna start out by looking at the importance of a continuous improvement plan for your system, having one in place, which will consist of establishing a change control board to oversee, review, and approve enhancement requests that are going to be going into your system, to put a timeline to them, and define the overall enhancement process. We'll then look at the sources of input to that process. So, where we're getting these enhancements from, how are they being submitted, so the sources of all of the actual enhancements and enhancement requests that come through the continuous improvement work stream, and then also the review and approval process of those enhancement requests. And so the frequency of the meetings, around the key resources involved, so both from a business standpoint, technical resources, as well as your support organization, how often they typically meet to sort of review and gather the inputs to the continuous improvement work stream. And then we'll discuss how to manage those enhancements and ensure that every request is properly tracked and documented and assessed for criticality and effort. Next, we'll look at how to prioritize those enhancements and allocate them for point releases. So when it comes to prioritization and managing those enhancements, we're also going to do in addition to just going through the webinar, we've designed a small exercise that we'll sort of do live during our webinar today and look at ways to sort of manage and prioritize those enhancements. And we'll look at the timing of those enhancements as well, and look at how that will come into play in defining your continuous improvement process. And when to make those enhancements to the system is going to be crucial in that. And finally, we'll cover some best practices for continuous improvement plans, and we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers. And again, I just want to remind everyone that we have everybody on mute, so if you do run into any sort of issue during our webinar, please click on the raise hand button or submit your question or issue in that chat feature. And also, if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer at the end of the webinar, please go ahead and submit that on the chat function at any time during the webinar as well. And I want to remind everyone that we are recording the webinar, and it will be posted to our website within 24 hours. So with that, let's get started. So I wanted to start by looking at a pretty common scenario when it comes to implementing a system, and it really doesn't matter what type of system that we're implementing, but here's a pretty common scenario. So if you've implemented a system within your organization before, you can probably relate to some of this. So we've just completed the initial release, phase 1 release of the implemented solution. End users have just gone through training and are ready to go into the system to start doing their day-to-day activities. In the initial release, after much discussion on all the requirements that were captured, it's typical that not all of the requirements made it into the first release. So this is typical of any system release, whether where based on either budget or timeline, internal resources, or other reasons, a subset of the requirements were implemented. And this phased approach is typically more successful anyway than a big bang implementation, to reduce the overall change impact on the users and reducing the time in delivering valuable functionality to the users. So doing a phased approach is actually pretty advantageous in that regard. But the end result is that not all of the requirements that we captured were addressed in that first release. So the initial release may also have been rolled out to a subset of users and then there's a plan to expand that user base by rolling it out to other business units as well in subsequent phases. And we also have an annual budget meeting coming up where we can put in requests for project budgets for upcoming planned projects. So this is the scenario. What do we do now? What's next? So as you can appreciate, having a system implemented is only half the equation. It's important to develop a plan to ensure the long-term success of that implementation and high user adoption. So a good way to manage a post-implementation support is to create a continuous improvement plan. It helps bridge the gap between traditional help desk and support plan since it establishes a formal committee to oversee the post-production support process. With a formal plan and process in place, end users will be less anxious about being able to enhance the system later. So this way they know that there's a plan to include all of their requirements eventually in the long run. So knowing that there's a plan in place for enhancements, it prevents users from cramming all of their nice-to-have requirements in that initial phase. Establishing the plan also encourages end-user communication and feedback as they use the system. The plan also allows the system to be updated and flexible. Example is if a change in business process warrants a change in system functionality. It establishes an objective way to evaluate potential enhancements and ensures wise investment of that time and effort. And having a plan also increases system acceptance and usability since the plan calls for user feedback and input throughout the use of the system. So the first step is to create a change control board, which will help to carry out the improvement plan. And it should be made up of a mix of different stakeholders. So the business representatives provide the main input on enhancements and usability of the system, since they're the ones who interact with the system every day. The majority of improvement input would be coming from them. The clinical administrators will be able to provide more input around the questions and issues they've encountered from all user support and daily operations. So it's important, either from the clinical administrator or from help desk support to really gather that information around the support questions and help desk support that has been requested by the users, so we can focus some continuous improvement enhancements on the things that users have had the most issues with. And then an IT project manager or someone from the IT department should be involved as well to help track the user input and requests, determine feasibility, level of effort of those requested changes, and also to help carry out those plans, organize reviews, and initiate those change control projects. So each of these groups and representatives is crucial to have a well-balanced change control board that can objectively review enhancement requests and make decisions based on what the organization needs. Next, let's look at how we define the enhancement process. So as part of the improvement plan, you should define the following. And from on the slide, it's bottom to top. What we need to do is define how to collect the enhancements. So what is the mechanism used to capture ongoing requirements? Define how often to meet and review those enhancements. Define how to manage and prioritize those enhancements. And define when to roll out those enhancements. And we'll look at each of these in a little bit more detail. So let's look at sources of input for the ongoing requirements. Well, we already have our deferred requirement list from that initial release. So when we did that initial release, we've done an analysis, and we had a series of requirements. Not all of them made it in, so some of them that were deferred is usually a great starting point for the upcoming enhancements. We also have direct user feedback. So after users start to use the system, users usually discover additional items which may be helpful from a day-to-day for their day-to-day activities. We have the help desk issue log. So this can indicate, again, what particular modules or areas users are struggling with, and we may want to focus some enhancements around that key piece of functionality. Training session feedback. Users usually gain a lot of insight of the system when they have hands-on training, and will typically give feedback on that system as a result during that training session. So it's a good way to manage user expectations and let them know that their feedback is being captured somewhere and is valuable, and it's going to go into this process. The long-term IT infrastructure roadmap. So we need to look at the overall IT infrastructure to determine potential enhancements that may not have been available at an earlier time, or that may be more feasible in the future. Integrations with other systems and the desire to sort of have that company-wide, enterprise-wide integrations is going to be a key driver in some of the enhancements that you may make to your system. And then user community conferences, new ideas are presented at user community conferences. So, whether they're within your organization or even outside, that's a great way to sort of get additional ideas of enhancements that will ease some key challenges that your users are facing. So each of these are great sources of input to your ongoing requirements of your system, and you should be actively documenting these in a controlled manner to ensure nothing is being lost in the process. Next, we have to define how often the resources involved should meet to discuss newly documented requirements from each of the sources of input. So typically what we've seen is the following. We have a monthly meeting with the end user community to receive system feedback. So we have a regular ongoing process for meeting directly with the users. And then we have a quarterly meeting to review issues logged from help desk or training feedback. And then we have a quarterly meeting for the change control board to review all those potential enhancements. This is just what we've seen in the past, but ultimately each organization should define the meeting schedule based on their own timelines, their own resources, and availability. So how do each of these groups manage and document their enhancement requests? Most often, we've seen organizations utilize just a formatted Excel spreadsheet where they capture all the necessary information about that request. You can also use some functionality in a bug tracking system you may use in your support organization to track both bugs and enhancements to sort of keep it all centralized. But in any case, you'll need to categorize each request as a true enhancement or a defect where something implemented is just not working as desired. You'll need to assess each request from different perspectives. How critical is the request? Is not having it not allowing the business to do their job, or is there a reasonable workaround in the interim? How complex is the request from a design and development perspective? Does the benefit of the functionality and the enhancement outweigh the cost potentially that will incur for implementing it? How detailed is the validation effort? Does it touch multiple areas of the application which may need a large revalidation effort or regression testing effort? Does it impact multiple modules and pose any upgrade risks? So all of these things are things that we need to assess about each request that's coming in from each of those sources. How do we assess business operation criticality? So at the very least, we need to capture the following information. We need to identify the business requester, who's making the request, capture clear business request details, provide justification for the enhancements, or again, what key benefit do they see in implementing that enhancement, determine impact on daily operations, identify potential alternatives or workarounds, capture a request date, and capture the requester's initial priority ranking on that enhancement. So this ensures that we're looking at the business's specific and hopefully objective viewpoint on the need for that enhancement. So determining level of effort for design and development. We need to look at the actual effort involved in implementing that enhancement. So by doing this assessment, we need to look at the level of effort that's required, both from a design and development perspective. So just looking at a small change from a development standpoint, it could have a larger impact on the documentation, design documentation, as well as all the other documentation that go along with the system. Is custom coding required? So that could make it additionally complex. Can it be done in-house? Do we have to get an outside vendor to actually perform these updates? Or can it be done with in-house resources, and are those in-house resources available? Does it build on the current system architecture? So are we using the same platform? Does it fit within that overall vision of system architecture? And have we identified different design and development approaches? So if we're looking at that assessment or looking at that initial request, are there other ways to sort of meet that key goal that the business is trying to achieve by doing something slightly different within the system? So each of those things needs to be looked at when you're assessing the design and development complexity. Next, we need to assess the validation effort. So we know quite well that even something that's perceived as a very small or minor change can lead us down the path of a significant validation effort. So we need to look at the level of validation required, the validation scenario complexity. Is it a small change in multiple modules, which may cause complex validation scenarios for the use case that we aim to retest? So we need to look at sort of how complex is the scenario that we need to, is it going across multiple modules, or is it isolated? And in the same light, regression testing, what's the need around regression testing? How much regression testing is going to be needed based on the change? Do we need to validate every process downstream and upstream from that proposed enhancement, or is the change that we're making, again, pretty isolated? And on a similar topic to regression testing, we need to look at, again, impacted modules and upgrade risk. What's the impact of the change on the existing functionality? How many modules are impacted? What is the impact on existing integration? Does that need to be updated as well during this enhancement change? And does the other system need updating based on this change in this system? So we have to look at, when it comes to integration, how it affects not only this system, the integration, but also any updates to the other system that we're integrating to. And finally, what's the impact on future upgrades of the system? Is the custom coding that we're doing now put a simple upgrade of the software at risk? And if so, are we willing to accept that risk? Does the benefit that the enhancement gives our users, good enough for us to accept a minimal amount of risk around upgrades? Next is, how do we prioritize those requirements? So now we've captured all of the key things that we need to do around each of those requirements or each of those enhancements. How do we prioritize those enhancements? Is there adequate justification in terms of for the business for this to be a system change instead of a process change? Can we identify a change in the process that might achieve the ultimate goal that the enhancement is trying to achieve? Ensure that all business units come together to evaluate the requirements. So even if it's one business unit that's submitting it, it may have a broader impact on everyone that's using the system, of course. So we need to look at whether other business units have any sort of impact and whether they have any feedback around how that gets implemented in the system. We need to rank requirements by level of importance. So we have high, medium, and low is one way of ranking it. But when users are submitting enhancements, typically all of theirs would be high all the time. So coming up with some sort of either numerical or other objective ranking method works really well. And that way, it's a good way to avoid everything being listed as either a high or a medium, and really just focusing on the level of importance on each of those requirements as they pertain to each other. So when do we make these enhancements? So again, looking back to our scenario, we've just went live with the system, and now we're starting to capture these requirements. Our recommendation is the initial enhancements to the system that we don't make them until about 3 months after that initial release. And the reason for that is it provides the end users an opportunity to get familiar with the system, to use the system, and in some cases, requirements that were deferred from that initial release may not be requirements that they absolutely need in the system after they start using the system. So things change, requirements change, as people start to use the system and understand how it's supposed to meet their business process. So this gives us and gives our users time to gather and refine that list of requirements. And also during that 3-month process, we're also capturing support and help desk issues that our users are having. So this gives us some good feedback into potential areas of the application that we need to address sooner rather than later if we're seeing a lot of help desk related calls around key modules within the system. So that's for your initial enhancements. So waiting that long to at least put in some enhancements to a release system. And then subsequent releases or continuous improvement, change controls, really depends on the budget and resources that are available. You may have minor releases every 3 or 6 months. We've seen even at some of our clients where they roll out a monthly enhancement, and it might be minor and usually is, but that's what they've committed to the users, that there's that level of support that on a monthly basis the users can see additional requirements being rolled into the system. Obviously that becomes a little bit more challenging to manage, so you do need additional resources to manage something like that. But what we've seen work well is minor releases every 3 or 6 months. And then you can roll the enhancements in with a major release also, so you can have a few minor releases and then slate a major release such as an integration or a new module in as a larger point release. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a sample exercise which will look at a list of enhancement requests for the Siebel clinical system. And I have a spreadsheet that has a listing of enhancements, and we're going to fill out some of that information and some of those requirements on that list. So let's take a look at that. Let me share. Okay. So what we're looking at is an Excel spreadsheet, again, a simple Excel spreadsheet that is that's used to track enhancements and defects that we aim to sort of put into our system. And so what we're going to do first is sort of look at look at the fields that we have available. So it's everything that we just talked about, where we're capturing request date, who the requester is, the area of the application, the description of the request, whether it's an enhancement or a defect, what the priority level is, and right now we just have a high, low, medium, high, and critical. We have an area for the users to put in some sort of justification of why that requirement or why that enhancement is critical or high, whether there's a workaround or not. And then we have fields to fill out around effort and time and cost level, the validation effort, how many modules are at risk, whether there's a future upgrade risk, and then ultimately our decision, whether we're moving forward with that requirement or it's and when it's going to be slated for. So this is what we're a very simple spreadsheet where the first set of fields is what the users or what our sources of input will actually enter in the enhancement, and then we have an assessment piece that we'll do on the change control board side. So what we're going to do is, and most of these are filled out, but what we're going to do is just go through an exercise and fill out a few of these. So this first one is around protocols, the ability to indicate that a subject does not complete an informed consent associated with a protocol amendment. The subject does not need to complete an informed consent. So this is an enhancement. The priority level, it could be low, medium, high. I'm going to say it's low. The justification is we need the ability to track versions of the protocol and subject as a template where a re-consent is not required for subjects. So something might have changed in the version or the protocol was amended, but we don't need to get subject reconsented. So just to indicate that, so we know that going into the rest of the system, that's what they want to be able to have. Well, is there a workaround? Yeah, there is a workaround. There's comments fields and potentially other fields that we can use. Comments on the protocol version itself, and the subject as a template itself for us to comment on that. So there are workarounds. They might not be ideal, but they're there. Effort in development and design time. I'm going to say it's minimal because it's just an additional field here and there. The validation effort is going to be minimal. And modules at risk is going to be the protocol versions and potentially, let's say the subject visit template. And a future upgrade risk, I'm going to say that there's no upgrade risk there, just because it's just an additional indicator field that we want to be able to track. So that's very simply how we would fill out this information. Really, again, we need to be as objective as possible when we're putting in this priority level justification and workaround. And if we're having the users actually fill this information out, we really need to define what each of these levels mean, right? So what this priority level means. So low, medium, high, and critical. Like if they absolutely can't do their job without this enhancement, that's what makes it critical. So really having a clear definition so everyone is comparing, again, apples to apples when we're looking at these enhancements. So let's go through the exercise of going through the rest of these, and we'll do this fairly quickly. I already have them filled out. So add the ability to mark site and PI assessments as not applicable and have them not weighted into a score. So if you've used content account assessments, they want to be able to have some of the questions not apply to their overall score. So that's an enhancement, and it's going to be a medium enhancement because there is some configuration that we need to do. So some assessment questions are not applicable to PIs or sites, and they should not count against the assessment score. I'm just going to fill out the rest of this. There's no workaround for that. The effort and time is moderate. Validation effort is moderate. The module's at risk, and the future upgrade risk. So again, just going through this, and we won't necessarily do these all just in the interest of time, so I'll just expose these here. And so as you go through this, again, this might be something that the users are doing, and of course this is something on the assessment side from a change control board. So as you go through this, and we have now a priority level for all of them, we have a request state for all of them, we have all this information, now it's up to us to sort of prioritize this list. And you can prioritize it in a number of different ways, right? So maybe you have a directive to say, you know what, we need to, let me just do this, we need to, if there's a defect in the system, we absolutely need to do those first, and then roll in any enhancements in that same change control. So to do that, you may sort by the enhancement or defect first. So let's look at that. So first we might sort by enhancement or defect, and we want to go from A to Z just because it's defect. Next we might want to sort by the request date. So everything that has been requested earlier than that has been sitting in a queue for a long time, we want to make sure that we look at those. And then of course priority level may play into that as well. So you might want to sort the priority level in some fashion. So if you have, again, instead of high, medium, and low, if you have a numerical order, that'll be a little bit easier to sort. But that way, you're able to sort this and start to look at the specific priority or prioritization that your organization is looking at. And the great thing about this is you don't have to prioritize in the same way for each change control, right? So your directives might change. You might need to prioritize a little bit differently for each change control that you implement. But this allows you to this gives you the flexibility to to prioritize this list based on whatever your organization needs are at the moment. So if there are things that are very, very minimal in nature and you want to roll those in very quickly, they don't have a large validation effort, then you might want to prioritize those higher in the list because you can include those with very minimal overhead if you're choosing to do a change control anyway. So that's some of the examples of how you can use and how you can define a clear process in sort of capturing all these enhancements and defects and going through and managing and prioritizing them. And again, we did it simply with Excel, but we've seen obviously clients use bug tracking tools like Bugzilla and others, internally, just to have a central repository or central place for everyone to log their enhancements and defects. So again, the sources of input are going to vary. So if you want to give that availability and access to for your users, your help desk, and other folks to log these enhancements in a central area, so then the change control board has this to work with, that might be something that you're going to want to look at. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation. Okay, so in summary, here's again the continuous improvement process. So we need to create the change control board. We need to define a continuous improvement plan. We need to collect those enhancement lists, again, from a variety of different sources. Once those are in a format for us to be able to look at and review and assess, we need to review and assess and prioritize that enhancement list. Once we determine the decision on which enhancements are going to go into the release, we need to determine the scope of that project and slate enhancements to be included in that release. So we may have a budget for just X number of days of design and development. So based on what's in that list, we may need to draw the line and say, okay, we can only cover 3 or 4 enhancements during this change control. So defining the scope, looking at the resources available, we need to allocate the enhancements to be included in that release, and then we'll create a change control charter, open up the change control and all the documentation that goes around that, and then kick off that project. And so once you have kicked off the initial change control, the whole process, of course, starts again, right? So now you've already have a change control board. You've already developed a continuous improvement plan. So all you need to do now is run through the collection of those enhancements, the review and assessment and prioritization, again determining the scope, creating each change control, and kicking off that project. So then you just need to repeat that process on an ongoing basis. So finally, we'll look at some best practices for continuous improvement plans. Start thinking of your plan prior to the initial go live. This should incorporate deferred requirements, your support organization, key stakeholders, and making recommendations and reviewing and approving requests in that formal process. You need to schedule recurring meetings to establish the continuous improvement process. Again, this needs to be across all key input resources, as well as for the change control board itself to set those expectations. After the initial release, ensure that users have a chance to use the system and understand its functionality before planning any additional releases. It's key to get users to use the system before scheduling a point release. Some deferred requirements, again, may change in priority, and additional requirements may be uncovered through the use of the system. And one final note, the continuous improvement process can also result in non-system changes, such as training material updates, business process reengineering, and additional documentation. So again, the focus should not simply be on changing the system, but also an evolution of the process, the technology, the training, and support initiatives surrounding it as well. So with that, we'll move into your questions. And as a reminder, just submit those questions in that chat feature on your screen, and we'll try to address as many questions as the time allows. Eugene?
Great. Thank you, Padam. So as Pura mentioned, please go ahead and submit them on the left-hand side of your screen. I'll begin with a few questions that we've already received. Hopefully we can get through them. The first question, there's several parts to it, but first question is, who exactly should be on the change control board, how many people, and representing which areas? Should one person on the board have the final say, or is it always a majority vote? What do you recommend?
So, I mean, we've seen different things on change control boards. I mean, typically it's going to be somebody that has sort of a budgetary responsibility for the system. System sort of system ownership is one aspect of it. If the business is just submitting these requests and the change control board is just reviewing and assessing, it's important to have some key lead business resource on that change control board, to help in that assessment as well. So, when we looked at, I think we looked at business representatives, the IT project manager, and what was that? The help desk support people that are actually assessing and reviewing the actual enhancements. So the change control board can consist of a similar makeup to make those final decisions. And should one person on the board have the final say? It really, I don't know. It depends on your organizational culture, right? So one of the things that you do want to make sure is that we're looking at all of the enhancements in a very objective manner, and really understanding what's being requested, right, and how that's going to change and how that's going to benefit the user base. So if there's an enhancement that's going to reduce the level of effort in the system for a particular user role, it's important to understand that that key benefit and how it sort of translates to overall sort of business operations. So as long as you have someone, if there's one person making decisions, or if there's a couple people making decisions, if they sort of understand the larger picture around everything and understand the resources that are available, and can objectively, sort of do those assessments, I think that's the key thing. So it really doesn't. I don't think it should matter if it's one person making the decision or if it's multiple. But as long as that collective sort of understands and makes objective decisions based on, budget and business need.
Okay, thank you so much. The next question is, who typically maintains the enhancement log? Is it somebody like the project manager, system admin, head of the change board, or someone else?
That's a good point. That's a good question. So again, we've seen a variety of different things. In some cases, we've actually seen the administrators of the system take a very active role in this, because again, from a interaction with the users, they have the most interaction with the users. So from a support perspective, things that originate out of support questions, things that originate out of just interaction with the users and understanding their frustrations, and being able to document and communicate those, back into the change control process. We've seen that be pretty successful. If you have allocated a project manager for the ongoing sort of continuous improvement of the system, then certainly that resource could be, and maintain that enhancement log as well, and sort of reach out to all the key stakeholders or the key people that provide input to that. So again, it needs to be somebody that can that has that interaction with each of the folks that are going to be providing input into the log, and is going to be part of this change control process. So the system admins and the PMs are typically going to be part of that process.
Great, thank you. What is the typical point release schedule that you've seen in the industry? Is it twice per year, quarterly, and so on?
Yeah, so there's not a whole lot that's I guess typical in the industry, right? So every client that we've gone to has had a different scenario, but I can tell you that very aggressive schedule that I've seen for a CTMS system is once a month, like I mentioned earlier. So once a month they've committed to something, some new enhancement or change to the system once a month, so the users know that if there's something that they want to be able to see, that they have an opportunity to raise that on a monthly basis, and they don't have to wait a year or 6 months or whatever to see that change potentially come through. So and again, different companies have different standards. So we've seen companies where each system has its own timeline for point release schedule, and then we've also been at a company where they have a set quarterly system update schedule, over a weekend or whatever, and then all systems have that same sort of release schedule. So you're sort of bound by your company's next system change schedule, and so your CTMS or your other whatever system that you're implementing would fall within that schedule, and that's again typically either what I've seen, I think quarterly or once every 2 months, something like that is pretty typical.
All right, and I think on the same note, this question is, where do patches from Oracle for the Siebel platform fit into the improvement strategy, or is that handled separately?
Yeah, so that's a great question as well. Typically, the patches from Oracle will go into your continuous improvement work stream, so it needs to be worked into the same way that enhancements and defects are worked through. But I mean, so it's still going to be logged. It's still going to be documented and tracked and assessed the same way. So when Oracle pushes a release, let's say of a patch release for Siebel, it may not be relevant for Siebel Clinical specifically. Because they're releasing a patch for the entire Siebel application. It may not have any additional functionality or impact for Siebel Clinical, so you may choose not to do that patch. So you still need to do an assessment of each patch, and you still need to go through that same process and work it into a change control. But you may choose to do the Oracle patches. You may choose to implement the Oracle patches separate from any sort of enhancements that you're doing, because then you can actually test the impact of that patch, obviously on the existing system, and then you can do your additional enhancements sort of after the fact. So working in two at the same time, it may result in a little bit more of a validation effort. So just on that, you may want to separate the implementation of a Oracle patch from the rest of your enhancements and just space it out that way.
All right. We have one more question, but I'm trying to have them elaborate a little bit. I think the question is customizing, can you customize a CTMS too much where it doesn't actually benefit the core product? What are your thoughts?
So yeah, I'll try to answer that. So I guess the question is, is there a downside to over customizing the application? And absolutely. So we've seen that in the past as well, where, and we call it out as death by automation. So again, anytime, and that was the key point that we brought up right at the end of this presentation, is that the change control process should not only be associated or looking at just technical changes to the system, but also looking at how the process may need to change. So really addressing requirements through a balance of technology and process, and maybe training. So when we looked at the things that are coming through the help desk, if all users are having issues with a particular area of the application, it may not be that the area of the application is problematic. It may be that our training around that particular module needs to be enhanced and beefed up a little bit. So what we've seen is through this same change control process, the things that will come out as deliverables may be quick reference guides or work instructions or job aids to sort of help the users in working with particular areas of the application. So absolutely, I would encourage, at least with the Siebel Clinical product, it is very, very configurable, so it can be attractive to sort of work in a lot of code and additional configurations to really enforce a particular process within the system. But you have to sort of, I think you have to address requirements with a balance of process and technology. So don't try to over-automate the system. Don't try to enforce the process within the system. You want the system to enable the process, but not necessarily enforce the process. And what I mean by that is, as your company grows and as you scale, and as we know within our industry through acquisitions and mergers and things like that, processes are redefined. And what you don't want is for every time a process changes that you have to change the system as well, because you've made your system so rigid that it can only work under one process. So make the system flexible enough. Focus your enhancements on things that will improve usability, but continue to make the system flexible enough that you're not taking the human element out of the equation. So really, don't try to have your system dictate exactly how everything's going to run within the system. And so that's the guidance that I would give. And we've seen that early adopters of at least the Siebel system, have realized that over configuring and over customizing the system is actually not advantageous to their long-term vision of running clinical trials. So using the out-of-the-box functionality, or at least configuring the tool or configuring the application with best practices that are established, will ensure that you have a good system with good functionality and you have low risk from an upgrade perspective. So absolutely, that assessment needs to be put in place when you're assessing these enhancements as well.
Great, thank you so much. So it looks like we have used up the allotted time we have for this webinar, so that'll end our Q&A session. If you have other questions, please feel free to contact us via phone or email. We have some contact information right in front of you. Once again, note that today's webinar will be available on biofarm.com within 24 hours for you to review and share with your colleagues. I will also send everyone a link to the recording. We thank you for your participation and hope that the information we provided you today was helpful. We look forward to having you at future webinars. Have a great rest of the day and evening.